All right, welcome. Today, we're tackling a massive, and I mean really provocative, idea from our source material. A single blueprint that's supposed to be able to rebuild any society from the ground up. It starts as a plan for Venezuela, but the claim is that it holds the key to reconstructing pretty much any nation on the planet.
So just think about that for a second. What if there was one single blueprint to rebuild any nation? I mean, imagine you had a universal instruction manual for creating the perfect society, a literal step-by-step guide to engineering a stable, healthy nation right from scratch. Yeah, it sounds a little like science fiction, doesn't it? But that's the absolute core premise of the framework we're going to explore today.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this thing, here's the path we're going to take. First up, the Universal Reconstruction Plan itself. Then, we'll dig into what it's all built on, this idea about knowledge and human nature. After that, we get to the main goal, something called the healthy thinking function. And finally, we'll look at who's supposed to put all this into practice, a group called the true experts. All right, let's dive right into part one, the Universal Reconstruction Plan. And really, that subtitle, A Blueprint for Venezuela and Beyond, it kind of tells you everything you need to know about just how ambitious this whole thing is. Yeah, the first thing you've got to grasp here is just the sheer scale of it all. This isn't some quick fix for just one country's problems. No, the whole argument is that the exact same fundamental principles can be used everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're rebuilding after a war, an economic collapse, or even if you just want a complete societal reset. The claim is, this plan works. So you're probably wondering, how could one plan possibly work for every single nation? Well, according to the source material, the answer is in its foundation. And that brings us right to section 2, knowledge and human nature. This is what the author sees as the absolute bedrock of what they call a true society. And this right here, this is the central belief that powers the entire framework. The argument is that for human beings, knowledge isn't some luxury. It's a primary need, just like food. Get that? By putting information on the same level as, biological survival, the whole plan completely redefines what a society is even for. Everything, and I mean everything else we're about to talk about, flows from this one pretty radical idea. So, if you follow that logic, what's the conclusion? Well, if knowledge is just as vital as food, then a society's main job, its number one function, has to be providing that knowledge. This means things like the economy, the courts, healthcare, they're not on the same level as the education system. Nope, they're just support systems for it. The entire government becomes this massive engine designed for one thing, delivering knowledge. And that brings us to the intellectual heart of this whole proposal. It's a concept called the thinking function. And you really have to understand this part because making this function healthy is presented as the ultimate goal, the whole point of this rebuilt society. So, what on earth is this human thinking function? Well, the easiest way to think about it is like a kind of mental operating system that everyone has inside them. And in this framework, a nation's success isn't measured by its GDP or how strong its military is. It's measured by how many of its citizens have this internal OS activated and running smoothly. So a healthy society is basically just a network of people whose mental software isn't corrupted. Okay, but how do you keep that mental OS healthy? Well, the framework is super specific about this. It needs a particular kind of fuel, which it calls correct and comprehensive knowledge. And this part's crucial. We're not talking about just any old learning or free-flowing information here. No, this is about feeding the mind a very specific, prescribed diet of knowledge, the kind that's designed to activate and maintain that thinking function for your entire life. So what exactly is in this correct knowledge curriculum? The text gives a few examples, and honestly, they're pretty abstract. It talks about things like knowledge of the faith function, the sense of mission function, and the logic function. Now, they aren't fully spelled out, but it definitely suggests a curriculum that's about way more than just memorizing facts. It seems designed to install a very specific worldview, a certain kind of belief system, a sense of purpose, and a particular way of thinking, all as the key to a stable society. And here's the payoff, right? This is the stark choice the framework presents. On one side, you have citizens with a healthy thinking function. They're stable, they're productive, they're focused on actually building things. And on the other side, well, you get the opposite. People with an unhealthy function who have erratic tempers and are easily swayed by divisive religious or political issues. The whole thing is framed as a clear choice: societal cohesion or complete chaos. Okay, this all sounds incredibly ambitious, right? So the obvious question is, who on earth could actually implement a plan this radical? And that brings us to our final section. And the answer the text proposes, a special class of leaders known as the true experts. So what makes somebody a true expert? Well, according to this framework, it has absolutely nothing to do with being rich or being a clever politician. Their only qualification is a deep, almost scientific understanding of that thinking function we've been talking about. They're basically supposed to be master engineers of the human mind, and this unique knowledge is presented as the only legitimate reason for them to be in charge. And the moral standard for these leaders is set incredibly high. I mean, listen to this quote from the text. It warns that they can't act like farmers raising animals for profit, building a society just to, and I'm quoting, harvest dignity or plunder gratitude. So this isn't about power or ego. Their motivation is supposed to be completely selfless. Which brings us to their one and only mission. It's not about personal gain. It's not about glory. It's not about getting rich. Their entire purpose, the only thing that justifies their authority, is to make sure the thinking function of every single citizen is healthy. That's it. That is their only job. So this kind of gives us a peek into how these experts are supposed to see the world. They see humanity as being at the tail end of its collective childhood, basically ready for some grown-up guidance. They get how things like religions and political parties work, the mechanics of them, but not as players in the game, more like observers. And yeah, it's their job to manage the country, but they have to do it from a transcendent position, meaning they have to stay completely above the messy day-to-day squabbles of politics. And so when you put all these pieces together, the grand vision really comes into focus. What we're looking at is a society that's been meticulously re-engineered from the top all the way to the bottom. Every single institution, every law is fine-tuned for one ultimate goal, making sure that every citizen's thinking function is in perfect health. And that leaves us with one final and pretty provocative question to think about. A society guided by a special class of true experts, all in the name of achieving collective mental health. Is that a blueprint for a perfect system, or could it also be seen as a blueprint for a perfect form of control? It's a challenging thought for sure, and it really gets to the heart of what this whole framework implies. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.